Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, it has been nearly a week since voters went to the polls in California. They are still not anywhere near close done to counting and tabulating the ballots, and it's bringing forth an interesting question. What can you trust? We'll talk about government trust and institutional trust coming up right here on the Nick Craig Show. And a good Monday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand. It is totally free and simple. Just search for the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app, or visit the website nickcraig.com. You can also listen there and all of our other channels and platforms as well. Our program this morning brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up as we roll through this busy Monday edition. Trust. It's a very important word. I spent the weekend up in Blowing Rock, North Carolina for a leadership fellowship that I'm doing this year. And the premise and a lot of the discussion this weekend revolved around ethics and leadership, and trust was a major topic of conversation. And talking about emerging as a leader and being somebody in a leadership role, that discussion, that conversation, those issues as it relates to trust are incredibly important. If you look at any numbers, any data, you will see very clearly that for individuals that do not have trust with their bosses, their managers, the organization in which they work for, those entities tend to be in states of decline. When the people that work for you do not trust you, you are likely not to get good results from said people. This is a very easy concept to understand and a very easy concept to wrap your head around. Trust is incredibly important. That's in the private sector. We then now look at the public sector with government. Trust is incredibly important. We spent all of Friday's show going through the details of a very disturbing meeting taking place in Raleigh last week, in which officials from the Charlotte and Mecklenburg County were hauled in front of the House Oversight Committee to discuss how their failures led to the death of a 6-year-old by the name of Dominique Moody. And on that program, we talked about how government had failed her. Government, in large part, had failed not only her, but the citizens of Charlotte, the citizens of Mecklenburg County. And so you get into this spiral where individuals start to lose trust. And I think inherently there is a pretty significant level of general distrust when it comes to government. And there's a variety of different reasons for that. I think people just kind of inherently have this idea that government, and for good reason, due to a lot of scandals and controversies that have come out over the last couple of decades, they have, in some cases, some pretty significant skepticism when it comes to government. And that's relevant at the federal level, state level, and local level. There are some trust issues as it relates to government, which I think is in large part actually probably pretty healthy, right? We should not have implicit trust of government. And it's because of all of the things that they've managed to screw up and butcher in years past. So this discussion and conversation brings us to California, where almost 1 week ago, voters from across the state made their way to vote in a variety of different primary elections taking place, whether it was the California governor race or, more prominently, the Los Angeles mayor primary. We're now, more than a week later, it appears blatantly obvious that Spencer Pratt, who was leading the vote by 6%, 7%, 8% on the morning after the election in the early parts of Wednesday morning, is now going to lose. He is going to lose this jungle primary taking place in the city of Los Angeles. Karen Bass is going to move forward at currently about 34.7% of the vote. Radical progressive, radical left-wing city councilwoman Nita Raman is going to advance in second place. Spencer Pratt will be in third and will be boxed out of the primary it will be boxed out of the primary, therefore will not be eligible and will not be on a ballot coming up in November of this year. And as we have seen in California and in other, most prominently California, in recent years, there is a lack of trust. Why? Because it has now been nearly a week since the election took place. And every day that has gone by since then, Spencer Pratt, the Republican in this race, who was very critical of the Democrat leadership in Los Angeles and in a broader context, California as a whole, has consistently been receiving very, very small number of votes as mail-in ballots, tens of thousands of mail-in ballots, continue to flood into the election. Now, I am not here today to tell you for certain that there is fraud taking place in California. I cannot say that definitively. What I can say definitively, without a shadow of a doubt, is that when a state like California has such an inefficient system like they do, it only makes sense that individuals begin to question whether the results are legitimate. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever that counting ballots in the state of California should take this long. We are not, and contrary to some of my own probably comments in the past, California is not actually a third-rate society. It is not actually a third-world country. There is no reason why things should take this long, but they do. And so when you woke up 1 week ago, or last Wednesday morning, and saw the election results, and you saw Spencer Pratt in a pretty healthy second place, and then as we worked into Thursday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday, the election results kept changing day after day after day. Pratt continuing to fall and fall in the vote tallies, all of a sudden until Sunday night when he fell for the first time into third place. He's down about 3,100 votes as of right now. It is only logical that individuals begin to question and start wondering, is this legitimate? Is there something nefarious going on in the city of Los Angeles and in broader context, the state of California, where a similar situation is taking place in the governor's race? Steve Hilton had a massive lead on election night. He is now in second place. He's got a much larger margin than Spencer Pratt did, but it's the same situation going on there. Every day that has gone by, there have been more and more votes, and in some cases, numbers that seem like they would only be described as statistical anomalies as it relates to votes being tallied in the voter dumps that have happened in recent days with Spencer Pratt and Steve Hilton. And so I think as generally skeptical people of government, you sit back and reflect on this and say, what exactly is going on here? How exactly does something like this play out? How exactly am I supposed to have just general implicit trust in an institution like government in the state of California? And this creates kind of this lingering, maybe even you'd describe it as domino effect across the rest of the nation, because nobody else has this problem. Even other Democrat states that have very loose rules as it relates to mail-in balloting, nobody else has this problem. There are major countries across the world that have far less availability to technology and resources than the United States, that have their entire election system almost done by election night or within the next day. This and what you see in a state like California, in a city like Los Angeles, is not by any stretch of elections normal. It's just not. This is a huge outlier. And when you've got these outliers in which Republicans are doing well, Republicans are performing well, and then day after day after day, they are not only losing votes, but the math just doesn't even seem to make sense. I can't sit here in good faith and tell you that I'm going to be critical of people that are beginning to question and have been questioning, is there something going on here? Is there some level of fraud that is currently taking place in the city of Los Angeles, in the state of California? I'm not going to sit here and punch down on people that believe that that might be the case. Because just looking at this with the naked eye, I think a rational, normal individual goes, what the hell's going on here? Something is not adding up, right? We go back to the old, does this pass the smell test? No, it really doesn't. At least it doesn't for me. And I think the vast majority of the American populace is in this same vein. So we're talking about what's going on out in L.A. and in larger part of the state of California. It has been now nearly a week since a primary election day. There is still potentially hundreds of thousands of votes remaining in the state of California, about 150,000 remaining in the city of Los Angeles as a whole. California's very lax of voter laws in which they just mail out ballots to everybody, no ID verification, creates a situation where for individuals that are interested in changing the results of an election, individuals that want to affect what is going on with voting could do so. And so I caught this interesting opinion piece by Joel Pollack over at the New York Post this weekend. And I just wanted to read through a little bit of it because he does a really good job kind of outlining what's going on here. He writes this: half of America is watching LA count its votes with a sense of deja vu. The spectacle of a candidate who is leading on election night suddenly falling behind when mail-in ballots are counted. It is what caused many to regard the 2020 election as fraudulent. And he goes on to say this: there was no proof of fraud then, and there is no proof in LA. But the process does not inspire confidence. The fact that we are being told by incumbents that everything is okay only deepens the suspicion. It was always possible, as I had said before Election Day, that socialist Nita Rahman would take second place ahead of Pacific Palisades fire survivor Spencer Pratt. I used an analogy from auto racing that Rahman was drafting off of Pratt, letting him do the tough work of attacking incumbent Karen Bass and take all the attacks in return, then scooping up voters who decided they could not re-elect Bass but would not vote for a Trump-like Republican. Yet, assuming that Rahman does qualify for the general election ahead of Pratt, which seems like is going to happen at this point, it would have been better to know that on election night, not several days after the fact. If there were, in fact, fraud, this is exactly what it would look like. Again, there is no proof of fraud, but there is also no proof that there isn't. And those who defend California's system as necessary for fairness and accuracy cannot explain why other Democrat-run states managed to count their results relatively quickly. The California vote counting debacle reflects a broader breakdown of societal trust, writes the author. Democracy is not just a matter of majority rule. It is also a system of taking turns. And if a minority, be it a racial minority or a political minority, is systematically excluded from government, the system starts to fall apart. Love him or not, Pratt stood for a part of LA that paid big taxes, but burned because it received poor services in return. His defeat is a blow to the idea of self-governance. In 2022, Pacific Palisades voted Rick Caruso over Bass. Caruso's mall in the Palisades was one of the only major commercial buildings to survive the fire last fall. He protected his own property with private firefighters. Most of what Bass was responsible for protecting burned down. Bass appears to have done poorly again In the Pacific Palisades, it's not clear what ramen offers the community. She held an event in the area before Election Day, but it was invisible in the fire zone before then. Around the nation, cities that are badly run by Democrats are choosing to go further left. Chicago voters ousted failing Mayor Lori Lightfoot in 2023 and elected Brandon Johnson, a favorite of teachers' unions. He is currently running the city into the ground, most recently watching the Chicago Bears look for a stadium in Indiana. The author goes on to write, New York elected Zohran Mamdani, who promptly let 18 homeless people die on the streets and is obsessed about Israel as anti-Semitic attacks sweep the city. Many Democrats think that Mamdani is a great success. They will claim crime is down, he's balanced a budget, so on and so forth, but notes that Mamdani had to rely on accounting tricks to make ends meet. Democrats don't know that because they tend to not be comfortable they tend to be comfortable rather and inhabit a comfortable mainstream media bias. And so the author goes on to talk about this, talk about trust, to talk about the system that is taking place and currently operating in the state of California, the city of Los Angeles, and makes a very good point. And as I said just a couple of minutes ago, I'm not sitting here right now with evidence in my hand to say there is fraud taking place in California. I do not have that. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I can tell you for certain as an absolute fact that that's taking place. But what I can say as somebody who works in this sphere, somebody that follows politics, is involved in politics very heavily. I would consider myself a 1%er in terms of my consumption of information, of news, of knowledge as it relates to political ongoings and things like that. Something does not add up. And that is, I think, where a lot of individuals find themselves. That they look at this as a rational, normal human being and say, how is it that 4, 5, 6 days after an election, the votes change so dramatically? With the vast majority of these votes being mail-in that have little, if any, terms of sort of protection against fraud in a place like Los Angeles in California, where anybody can just essentially find or get a ballot, fill it out, and throw it in an envelope, and California will count it 7 days, up to 7 days after the election. Also noting that these mail-in ballots are skewing so heavily left that, again, does this pass the smell test? Does this pass the logical test? And I think, unfortunately, for the greater society, the answer to that question is no. It sows distrust. It sows a level of scrutiny and a lack of confidence in a system that we should be able to trust. I am here today to tell you that as a society, we should be able to trust our election systems. We should have great confidence that individuals that are eligible and able to vote are able to do so, and those that are willing to and want to throw chaos into the mix through cheating should not be able to do so. I do not believe that that is a radical stance. I do not believe that that is a radical opinion. And how is it that I'm supposed to believe those values internally and then watch what's going on in California and say, yeah, this is totally normal. Yeah, this is a totally logical system, that we are almost a week removed from an election, and the Republican in that race, who was doing very well on election night, has now very clearly fallen into third place and will not be moving forward in the election. I think any rational human being looks at that and says, is there something nefarious going on here? I think that's general human nature. We'll get into more of this coming up on the other side. I've got a clip from President Donald Trump as he sat down with Kristen Welker and Meet the Press on Sunday. We'll get into some more details on that, plus a very busy news morning coming out of the Middle East as Israel and Iran are launching missiles back and forth. The Israelis conducting airstrikes. President Donald Trump is trying to convince both sides to back off of this, as he believes that we are on the brink of a deal with the Iranians to bring hopefully some level of stability to that region. We'll get into those details as well as the Nick Craig Show continues. But before that, I need to tell you and want to tell you about the Law Group here in Wilmington and remind you that if you have any legal questions, challenges, or concerns, visit and trust the Law Group right here in Wilmington. Going all the way back to 2003, Melissa Gott and her experienced team of attorneys have consistently provided high-quality, affordable legal services across the eastern half of North Carolina, regardless of the issue. Obviously, some more serious than others. No matter the issue, the Law Group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. They're not some big national law group. They are located right here in southeastern North Carolina, offices in downtown Wilmington. They're just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088, or online lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. If you are in a position where you have any legal questions or challenges, nobody better to reach out to than Melissa Gott and her team over at the Law Group. We appreciate their continued support here of the Nick Craig Show. All right, quick break. We'll round out the discussion on what's going on over in California, Los Angeles. We'll then transition over to what is going on in the Middle East as the Nick Craig Show continues, streaming live this Monday morning, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. Good Monday to you. Thanks for spending some time here. Don't forget, if you miss any portion of the program, you can check out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also watch a video version of the program that's available on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. All of those links over at the website, nickcraig.com. We're talking about trust, and this is as it relates to almost a week after the elections in California, primary election day taking place last Tuesday. The results that we saw the morning and the day after seem to indicate that somebody like Spencer Pratt was performing pretty well, and if you looked at some of the percentages and the margins that he had, it seemed like that he was trending towards kind of creating an upset in that race, coming in second place in the primary, and moving on to the general election in November. But as every day went by, Thursday, Friday, and over the weekend, votes that have been dumping in, mail-in ballots that that have been counted by election officials in Los Angeles and in California have shown, I think, what you'd call statistically improbable. Not statistically impossible, but a high level of improbability, as these ballot dumps are so heavily skewed towards a candidate that nobody was really in favor of. This would be the current radical left-wing city councilwoman by the name of Nayat Rahman, who is now in second place and is trailing and is above Spencer Pratt by about 3,100 votes or so, with only 83% of the ballots in. It has taken almost a week to get to 83%. That is creating, and rightfully so, a high level of scrutiny and a high level of distrust in our systems. President Donald Trump was on with NBC News' Kristen Welker on Meet the Press over the weekend. It was a heated exchange which caused him to eventually walk off of the interview. This is the back and forth that they had about what is going on in California, what is going on in Los Angeles. And the president says, I think, what a lot of people are feeling. You know, and I'll play the clip here in a second, but everybody is watching this in real time and saying, how is something like this possible? How can it possibly take more than a week to get these election results? How is it that the margins on something like this changes so significantly in the span of just a couple of days? And it raises a level of skepticism that I think is rational and normal for people to have when they watch countries, in some cases third world countries across the globe, have elections that are decided within a day or two. And we look here stateside and see, California can't figure that out? Here's a little bit of the back and forth between the president and NBC.
Let's talk
There's
about Todd
tremendous
Blanche.
evidence. There's nothing but evidence.
The
election was rigged. It was a dirty election.
Mr.
And it's
President,
happening again right now in California.
You've never presented evidence.
It's happening
that the
right now in
election
California.
was rigged.
Right now, look at what's happening in California.
To that?
It's
the
4
Republicans
days.
are doing well in
California. No, they're not. They're dropping fast because it's a rigged election. Let me tell you, it's 4 days. And they aren't even close to coming up with it.
That's how they count the votes.
You know why they're doing that? Because they're cheating.
Did you hear what she just said? Oh, that's just how they count the votes in California. And you don't think that's a problem? I mean, nobody thinks that that's a problem. NBC News, Kristen Welker, that's her justification for this. That's just how they do it in California. And I'm supposed to have implicit trust of said system. I'm not supposed to fall into any sort of opinion or have any thoughts that could possibly be a setup, that there could possibly be some nefarious activity going on. What kind of excuse is that? What kind of justification is that? The answer is it's not.
Cheating on the election.
Do you have evidence to support
all
that?
I have to do is look. All I have to do is look.
That's not evidence.
And I listen to people, and let's see what happens.
But, sir, that's not evidence.
Do you think it's appropriate?
That's how they count the votes in California.
Do you think it's appropriate that they have an election, and 5 days later they're nowhere close to picking a winner?
State and local officials acknowledge they are slow. They're urging.
No, they're crooked.
They're urging the votes to be counted quicker. That's how they vote in California.
They're crooked, just like you're crooked. Your press is crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked.
To be fair, I'm not crooked, but let's...
Really?
So there you go. There's just a little bit of the exchange. Shortly after that, the president would walk off the interview, Crystal Walker, oh, we came all the way out to Wisconsin for this interview and you're just walking up. It's just, she's just arguing with him. She's just jumping back at him with, well, this is just how it's done. This is just how it's done. Those kinds of comments are exactly what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. That is not something that is going to allow me to have implicit trust. This is the way that it's done. That is not a good justification. I'm sorry. That doesn't work for me. That is not a rational and a legitimate discussion that I'm willing to entertain. It's just how we do this. Okay. That's good. So I'll just ignore any of my questions, ignore any of my concerns, and trust the individuals like Karen Bass, who is currently in office, currently the serving mayor of Los Angeles. I'm just going to put implicit trust in her in a very nasty primary election that has taken place and just say, well, Karen Bass told me that everything is fine, so therefore it must be. The same woman that allowed the Palisades to go up in flames because of her incompetence as it related to, oh, I don't know, having water in reservoirs and water in fire hydrants. That's the person that I'm supposed to have implicit trust in. That's the person that I'm not allowed to question. That's the person that I'm just supposed to wipe away any sort of concerns or doubts about. And we wonder why there is a high level, and I would argue a growing level of distrust in government institutions. A growing level of distrust in the ability for government to do what it's supposed to. And again, it's not a direct comparison, but I want to, mention and kind of go back to what we talked about on the program on Friday, which was the House Oversight Committee hearing here in North Carolina, looking at officials in the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County over the death of 6-year-old Dominique Moody. People within Charlotte and the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County put their trust into Child Protective Services and expected that if there were, in the case of, without rehashing all of it, but all of these calls for service, 59 police calls, all of these alleged check-ins taking place, so on and so forth within Charlotte, that something like that wouldn't take place. That government wouldn't be so inefficient at its job that it would allow a 6-year-old girl to be habitually abused and neglected to the point where she was found dead in December of 2025. Again, I know it's not a direct one-on-one comparison, but again, it goes to this trust factor. Why is there a waning level of trust within government? Because it seems like every single time you look up, there is yet another abject, miserable failure of government on some of the most basic things that it should be responsible for, like keeping children safe, or, counting election results, processing and counting ballots. Somehow, this always is the case. Every single time you look up. And then, of course, when you question, when you trust but verify, you're immediately called a conspiracy theorist, you're sowing distrust in our government institutions, you're being a threat to our democracy, so on and so forth. It's not a threat to democracy to question why a state like California consistently has these mail-in ballots that come in that are so heavily skewed it seems mathematically impossible. I don't believe that that's sowing distrust. I think that's asking what most people would describe as a legitimate, valid question. So we'll be keeping an eye on this. It appears in all likelihood now Spencer Pratt is done. He's not going to be able to make up this margin, and it's going to be Karen Bass and a radical progressive who currently sits on the LA City Council, Nayib Rahman, who are going to advance to the general election. So if you're in California, your option is awful or worse. essentially, for your election results or for your voting choices coming up in November. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. All right, as we round out the program here on this Monday, we have got a lot going on. We just spent a lot of time talking about what's going on in L.A., but there's also a lot of movement happening in the Middle East. A lot of this unfolding throughout Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, and into the early morning hours of Monday, as both Iran and Israel have launched attacks back and forth, as we have now crossed the 100-day mark since the war with Iran began earlier this year, as now many folks are again continually wondering, what exactly is this off-ramp going to look like? We saw over the weekend that Israel decided to strike some Hezbollah terror groups in Lebanon. That prompted Iran to launch missiles into Israel, which continued throughout Sunday and the early hours of Monday. Israel then striking back with more airstrikes throughout portions of Lebanon and Tehran, where that was taking place early Monday morning local time over in the Middle East. President Donald Trump has now jumped into the conversation. Well, I mean, he's always been in the conversation, obviously, but more recently jumping into the conversation with both sides of this, saying everybody's got to stop. Like, I'm trying to bring a close to this conflict. I am trying to set up a path in which there is, and it's not going to be 100%, but I'm trying to set up some level of structure, some level of stability in the Middle East. And we've got both of these countries, both Iran and Israel, that seem just hell-bent on continuing to fire at each other. The president, over the last week or so, has had some pretty tough conversations with the Israeli prime minister and Benjamin Netanyahu. Apparently a profanity-laced argument with him. I believe that was it was either last week or the week prior, as Netanyahu consistently was highlighting and making the point that he was going to continue striking targets throughout the region, whether it was directly in Iran or going after some of their terrorist groups or their terrorist proxies, I should say, like Hezbollah, which continues to operate in portions of Lebanon. And the president is just in this case, President Trump has just said enough. Like, I'm trying to bring this thing to a close. I'm trying to work with all sides here. I'm trying to work with everybody here to get a deal that will lead to some level of prosperity, some level of stability within the region. And both the Iranians and the Israelis, I guess, seem to be more satisfied with just consistently trying to put on these little attacks back and forth on each other, which is completely kind of neutering the ability for a peace deal to be made. President Donald Trump claimed in a post on Truth Social that, quote, both sides, Israel and Iran, are looking to do an immediate ceasefire. Final negotiations on peace are proceeding subject to ignorance or stupidity getting in the way. That is directed directly at both Netanyahu in Israel and the current leadership in Tehran. The president wrote on Truth Social, the blockade will remain in place and is in full effect until a final deal is reached. Things should move more quickly. Thank you for your attention to this matter. With the president demanding that both sides stop shooting at each other. The president had a phone call with Trey Yingst from Fox News, who is in the Middle East. He's their top, I believe, their top Middle East correspondent, talking about this with him Sunday night, indicating that there's been very significant progress, I should say, on moving forward with a deal in the coming days, with the president telling Trey Yingst that there was some thoughts that potentially even this week some final deal could be made, that there would be maybe more significant progress. I would suspect now that both sides have consistently broken this, that the Israelis, for whatever reason, think that they need to continue to retaliate here. And again, let's make sure we lay this out. Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu carried out strikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon earlier this weekend. Iran retaliated, and now Israel's retaliating. I mean, so it's just this constant cat and mouse game. It's this constant back and forth. Why exactly did the IDF need to carry out these strikes in Lebanon over the weekend? I don't know. I don't believe there's any justification at all. And from some of the articles that I was reading over the weekend, there was some discussion that President Donald Trump found himself very frustrated with this issue as well, questioning why Netanyahu continues to carry out these strikes, which absolutely is going to cause a reaction from Iran. Was it necessary? Was Hezbollah and their proxies operating in Lebanon, did they really need to be struck this weekend? Like, did that absolutely have to happen? And the general consensus from everything that I read was no, it didn't need to happen. But that's what Israel decided to do. And so the president is growing seemingly ever more frustrated with Netanyahu, ever more frustrated with the IDF. We already know he's at his wit's end with Iran, as they seemingly are incapable of keeping any sort of ceasefire promise or deal moving forward. And unfortunately, with this continued escalation over the last couple of days, it seemingly is only going to lead to one thing: that the United States is going to have to go forth with its massive plan to decimate Iranian infrastructure. I mean, that is the unfortunate eventual solution in this, because both sides in this, Israel and Iran, seemingly want to continue to hurl rocks at each other. In the case, rocks in this case are actually missiles back and forth between each other, that the United States is going to have to start conducting these raids. The United States is going to have to start going back to bridge and power plant day, which the president warned back just a couple of months ago. That seems like where things are trending. I don't know why Netanyahu consistently feels like he needs to ratchet up the pressure, why he consistently has to poke the bear with Iran. The president in the United States has spent months now, has spent more than 100 days trying to come to a solution on this, trying to come to some situation where there is there is significantly less pressure, significantly less conflict in the Middle East. And for whatever reason, it seems like Netanyahu and Israel are just not wanting to play ball with that. They want to continue to poke the bear, these stupid strategic strikes that seemingly have no benefit whatsoever. It's just a continued escalation. And so Iran is obviously going to respond to that. And now you've got a situation where both sides are shooting missiles. Iran shooting missiles, the Israelis carrying out airstrikes on portions of Tehran and Lebanon over the last couple of days. This has been a miserable situation to follow. I mean, it really has been. This thing, I would have hoped, would have been wrapped up months ago. We are getting far deeper timeline, or time-wise, I should say, into this conflict that we ever needed to be. The president has got a lot on the line here. This is not a popular stance in the United States. It has caused major problems as it relates to oil and gas. Gas prices still averaging well over $4 a gallon. We're about to head into the summer months where gas typically is more expensive anyway. And so the president has, I mean, I'm a big supporter, big fan, have been of President Donald Trump, but he's got to bring this thing to a close. I mean, this is going to be quick. It's been 100 days. So either a deal can be made or it can't. And if a deal can't be made, then so be it. That's fine. Then do what needs to be done and move on. If this lingers, if this continues to linger for months, this is going to be a major, major problem for Republicans in the midterm election. The president, I would argue at this point, has probably 30, maybe 60 days left before this completely tanks the Republicans' ability to perform in the midterm elections. He has got to get this figured out. Again, if a deal can be made, great, then make it. If not, then move forward on bridge and power plant day, and so be it. There's got to be a conclusion to this conflict. There has to be. This cannot go on like this forever. It is totally ridiculous. So we'll be keeping an eye on that over the next couple of days as well. In some local news, more violence in downtown Wilmington over the weekend. Unfortunately, another shooting in the middle of downtown Wilmington. This is another great story to bring forward to you. WPD, the Wilmington Police Department, is investigating a deadly shooting that happened shortly after 1:30 a.m. Saturday morning on June the 6th. This right on North Front Street, as police have identified the victim who was shot and killed, 23-year-old Emmer Moore. Officers responded to a report of a shooting at 141 North Front Street, where they found a 23-year-old man with a gunshot wound, with police reporting that he died at the scene. To this point, no arrests have been made, and there is an ongoing investigation between law enforcement. This marks now yet another high-profile shooting in downtown Wilmington as the summer months are here. More and more tourism, more and more visitors, more and more traffic to southeastern North Carolina. We saw the situation where a Marine was shot and killed in downtown just back a couple of weeks ago. Another shooting this weekend, what can very much be described as a building issue for the city of Wilmington and for law enforcement to deal with as we head into these summer months. There is nothing that will be more devastating to all of the businesses and to the city and the region's economy as a whole than continued violence in downtown Wilmington that will force people out of that area and absolutely kill these local businesses. So we'll be keeping an eye on that investigation. I'll have updates on social media as they are relevant. If you aren't following me, you definitely encourage you to do so. You can follow me over on Facebook and X. Those links as well on the website, nickcraig.com. That's going to do it for a Monday edition. Thanks to the Law Group here in Wilmington for their continued support. LawGroupNC.com or 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. Also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app. And is heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Enjoy your Monday. We'll do it again tomorrow morning right here on The Nick Craig Show.